It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
Next question's from David. He says, what are your thoughts on buying a first home that's about 35% of our take-home pay, maybe 25 to 30% of gross? Rent has increased faster than home prices here, and rent is now about 40% of our take-home pay. Oh. I feel like I should have warned you guys, because this is that like, oh man, hot button kind of question, but I feel like we're getting so many questions like that right now just because of this weird housing market that we're in right now.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
He said that if he buys a home, it's going to be 35% of his take home.
Yes.
How much was that of his gross?
He said 25 to 30% of his gross.
25 to 30 of gross. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And his rent right now is 40% of his take home. Oh,
yeah.
So okay.
Oof.
So you guys know we don't do a ton of guests on the show. We do have somebody we're working on right now. That one of the things I don't know if we'll get to ask this question, but one of the things that's troubling me right now is that I love coming up with our ground rules for people on how to live your best life financially and navigating certain situations. But when you see that housing prices have gone up 33%. In just like the last 2.5 years, when you see that the cost of housing, because of the interest rate impact going from 3 to 5% and beyond, has actually caused the cash flow impact to be an increase of 74%.
74% cost of living.
You're just like, wow, how do you have a rigid system when the world's changing so fast? And I think a lot of you are probably asking that question. And it's something I lay... this is how I really bear the weight of this, is that I'm sitting there going, what do we tell our listeners? Because you seem tone deaf, you seem mean if you don't adjust some of these rules. And we always say the guidance is 25% on housing, and that's just to make sure you actually get to live a life. I don't want you to be house rich, life poor, and that's why we've put these guardrails up. But I also don't want you to think that we set a rule up in 2016, and that rule has never changed. I mean, that just seems kind of counterintuitive. So here's what I would tell somebody, especially because we're dealing with our team here at Abound Wealth too. When your increases in rent are 25 and 30%,
that's hard.
Every 6 months,
Super
if
hard.
you're not signing a longer term lease, you start to see, hey, we're dealing with something that I do hope this pass. And I think that with the interest rate increases, we're seeing the real estate market soften in a lot of areas. We're seeing price adjustments starting to pop up in the marketplace. So I am going to tell you, I think that you have some grace there, but you have to, just like when you start a business or you have a child, there are things that you have one-off life events that will derail you from your financial plan. But every time you derail from our given rules, you better be scared to death. This is chainsaw scary, is meaning that when you crank it up and you hear that loud sound and you hear the 2-cycle motor going, you're like, woo, I don't know if I'm in good ground here. So, and you have to also, like if you're buying a house bigger than that 25 to 30%, you have to ask yourself and be honest with yourself. Am I on a higher trajectory with my income to where maybe when I average out the next 3 years worth of income, I'm okay from a long-term trajectory? So once again, I'm thinking big long-term why, so that I'm not house rich, life poor. If you can think in terms of 3 to 5 years in the future and you say, okay, this is a tough decision I'm having to make, but I see a path where in 3 years from now, this will be reasonable. And I know I'm going to live in this area for the next 7 to 10 years at least, and I need to start setting roots. Okay, it's okay that I'm going to break and deviate from this 25%, but I better be scared and figure out how I can get it back on path ASAP, because I feel like this rain cloud's hanging over me until I get it back on track. That's the way I felt when I started my first business. Because I've shared on shows, I've shared in this book I've written, that me not doing Roth, me not doing certain things while I was starting the company, just in the back of my mind was like whispering in my ear, what are you doing? What are you doing? You need to feel the same way if you start deviating because of these unique times.
Yeah, I think the good news is you said you're like 25, 30% of gross. So you're close, right? Like we say it should be 25% or below, so you're not far off. I like your idea, Brian, of thinking about what's your income trajectory, but you have to be careful with that, because I've got a family member And man, they went and bought a house and they told me about all this money they were going to start making in this new job. And I'm like, oh, my new job, like blinkers started going off. Like, figure out how realistic your income trajectory is. Not like your best case, if things go great, if things go the exact way I think they should. Figure out like a very sober, realistic estimation. And here's what I would do if I were in your situation. I was going to make this decision. I would figure where else in my system I've got some slack. So if I know that I'm going to buy a house and it's going to be 30% of my gross take home, if I'm saving, meaning putting money into the future, 10, 15, 20, 25%, I'm like, okay, I've got some breathing room. If I'm doing this 30% housing decision and I'm not saving a dime anywhere else and I've got kind of an anemic emergency fund and I'm not very far along in the FOO, I would take a lot of pause because there's no safety net. When you do that, you are walking out on the tightrope with no safety net at all. So I would really look at my other consumption and figure out, okay, are there other places that if things got really bad, I could trim back? Or do I have consumption decisions that I could change where I could cut back to figure out how to get some more slack in the system because I'm really kind of going out a little bit further than maybe I should be on this housing decision? But I get where you are. If rent's 40%, I mean, theoretically, right, in theory, that's like a 10% savings or something, 5-10% savings. Oh, I feel for you, and that's tough. And yeah, it's hard. It's so hard out there right now.